you've been approached by some people. I believe the last time you said the Time magazine, you might have been in contact with someone there.
That was a while ago. That was about probably close to more like 15 years ago.
Right, but nonetheless, you've had an issue, and this is something I've heard from other areas as well, where you'll have someone who's very interested in your story or what you have to say, and they take it back to their organization, and for whatever reason, all of a sudden it's no, they don't actually want to discuss this, or they don't want to pursue this article. Now, obviously, sometimes that can be as simple as they just aren't interested. But
I'll explain why. What's really going on is that everybody loves the anti-bullying movement, and everybody thinks it's the right thing to do. It's the most uncontroversial social issue in history. Every social issue has pros and cons. People arguing this way, people arguing that way. Even climate change, you'll find people on both sides of the argument. There aren't two sides of the argument about bullying, even though it's been failing for 21 years. There's only one side of the story. Everybody thinks it's the right thing to do. What can be wrong with getting rid of bullying?
mm-hmm.
So major publications don't want to write anything critical of the anti-bullying movement.
Right, because then you could be seen to, and this is another issue.
They don't believe it. The people at the top don't believe there can be anything wrong with it.
Right,
exactly. It sounds so good
mm-hmm.
to get rid of bullying that nobody can imagine that there's anything wrong with it, and it might be counterproductive.
Yeah, it's almost like saying we need to get rid of meanness.
Right.
Like who's gonna sit there and go, oh, well, that seems like a terrible goal. But as you, I'm sure, would say, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that's just impossible.
It's exactly the issue. What's wrong with getting rid of meanness or evil? Actually, the academic definition of bullying that's being used today is identical to the academic definition of evil.
Wow.
So bullying really refers to evil behavior.
Right.
Repeatedly picking on people weaker than yourself, that's evil.
Right.
Same definition.
Wow, that's wild. Yeah. I want to maybe move along as well. It's speaking of evil. I remember a little while ago, I contacted you because I am concerned that there was a time period of a couple years that we saw the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. We saw the labor anti-Semitism scandal in the UK. We've seen people, or I've read articles rather, there have been reports of people being thrown out of, say, the Women's March in the United States, which was a big movement after Trump, for having an Israeli flag. There was also leaders of the Women's March who are glowing fans of someone like Louis Farrakhan, who is he's just an anti-Semite. 100%. There's no really denying.
He calls Jews, devils or demons.
Exactly.
Or
it seems as if this sentiment is coming to mainstream voices again, and I find that really troubling. And as one of the only people I know that is Jewish, to be honest, I know very few.
Yeah,
Jewish
you're in Nova Scotia, yes?
Newfoundland. So there's
Newfoundland. Sorry, there probably aren't too many Jews there.
Not a lot. No, we for a long time we were a very what like a monoculture essentially, and until recently we've started to diversify, I suppose. But
by the way, you had that mass shooting in.
Nova Scotia.
That was Nova Scotia.
That's right.
That's not far from you, is it?
It's very close. So that's the that is the province like directly next to us. I have a lot of family there, and it happened very close to where one of my uncles and aunts live.
The perpetrator's name could easily be Jewish. So, like, my first thought when I saw his name is, oh my God, is he a Jew? Did a Jew do this? But I haven't seen any reference to him being a Jew. His first name is Gabriel, which can be a Jewish name. It's from the
Right.
Bible. And his last name is Wortman. I've known people with a family named Wortman, Jews. So I thought, oh my God, is this a Jew? We need another Jew giving us a bad name on top
Right.
of Epstein and Bernie
Right.
Madoff and Harvey Weinstein.
Right. Right. That's just fuel for the anti-Semitic fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That was a terrible thing that happened. That was a crazy 2 day. Well, it's still terrible, obviously, but during that time, it was, what is happening? Where is he? What is happening? How many people have died? How many people have been shot? It was, they're still discovering details, I'm sure.
I haven't read up on it lately. I read about it, the first few days.
Yeah.
But anyway, people might want to know, why are Jews so hated?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they hate Jews so much?
Mm-hmm.
What have we done? I wouldn't mind addressing it.
By all means. Yeah, sure.
I think it's for a few reasons. One reason is Jews have been, I guess, calling themselves as the chosen people.
Okay.
If I go around and saying, like, the reason I'm saying this is not to justify the hatred, but to explain it, because I think like a psychologist. There's a reason for everything. So, the common human reaction to negative events is to condemn it. Oh, that's terrible. It shouldn't be. But my job is not to condemn. My job is to understand why it is. So I think there are a few factors. One of is the idea that we're chosen.
Mm-hmm.
If I go around saying that I belong to a chosen people and my people are chosen, are other people going to say, oh, wow, that's so great. You're chosen by God. I'm going to honor you and respect you. The natural reaction is, who are you? Who are you? Why are you chosen by God? So it's going to elicit, I don't know if jealousy is the right word, but a resentment. Who are you to think you're chosen by God?
Yeah, but certainly, I mean, I wouldn't think that it's only ever been Jewish people who have said things along those lines.
Do you know of another people that's also known as God's chosen people?
I suppose not. Not off the top of my head, but I can't.
Because it's in the Bible. You have to realize the Bible is accepted by the majority of the world. Christians accept the Bible, the Old Testament, or what Jews call the Torah, and Islam also accepts the Bible. The Bible was first, and the New Testament, and then the Quran. So, Jews, Christians, and Muslims comprise more than half of the world's population. Mm-hmm. So most of the world is familiar with the idea that the Jews are God's chosen people, and it's in the Bible.
Sure.
But still, you can't expect people not to resent us for being the chosen ones. Plus, if we're chosen, then we have to behave better than everybody. So people look at us with a microscope, everything we do. And if we do something bad, it's given more attention than if a non-Jew does something bad. And we're people, we unfortunately do bad things.
Fair enough. Yeah. Or at least certain members within the community might do, as members of any other group might actually do something poor. But there does seem to... sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, there were another couple of reasons or contributing factors to the hatred towards Jews.
Sure.
A second one is that Jews tend to keep to themselves, to each other. And the main reason is that the Jewish religion is a very demanding one, a very demanding religion, rituals from morning to night, the whole life revolves around it. And to live like a Jew, you pretty much have to do it within a Jewish community.
Right.
So Jewish
Okay.
communities were pretty much isolated and often dressed differently from everybody else. So whenever you have a group that's visibly different and separates themselves from everybody else, they're resented.
Mm-hmm.
And the third reason is that despite the hardships we've been through, Jews tend to be fairly successful.
Yes.
They haven't always been as successful as they are in North America. The United States has been the best country for Jews in the history of the world. It's
Mm-hmm.
because of the freedoms you have in America.
Mm-hmm.
In other countries, you have dictatorships. The Jews were kept under great restrictions, but in democracy, Jews have the same opportunities as everybody else. And Jews have always had a very big emphasis on education and writing. We've always been literate. We've known how to read and how to write when most of the world did not. So that's a big advantage. Jews also have, uh, we've given great respect to the educated among us, to the rabbis. And they were encouraged to have a lot of children. And since they got a lot of support financially from the community, they were able to have a lot of children. So the rabbis tend to be the smartest people with the most highly educated, and they have children, and their children are highly educated. So we've been very educated. And wherever we go, we've been using our education and our to help us survive and succeed. So we tend to be fairly successful. In the United States, we've been phenomenally successful. But what happens is, Jews have discovered that you can make a pretty good living from real estate. So they would buy up apartment buildings and fix them up and rent them out. But then they start being seen as slumlords. And sometimes what they're renting out really is slums.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who live in the slums resent the slum lords who are renting to them and not fixing up their apartments. So these kinds of things, because we're successful, the people who are not as successful and might be paying us for our services, which they think might not be fair, hate us.
Yeah.
So our success has also given people a reason to hate us.
Right. Right. And obviously, the overarching theme here is that it's people putting together patterns that aren't necessarily there. Like it's obviously not that not every Jewish person is a real estate agent. It seems stupid that I even would have to bring that up.
Except that we're overrepresented proportionally in real estate.
Right.
Honestly, if you look at the number of people in real estate,
Yeah.
they're much higher among Jews than among the general population. If you look at the people in finance, Jews are overrepresented.
Yes. And
0.2% of the world's population, but more than 0.2% of us are in finance or real estate or things that make lots of money.
right. And I guess that's another reason why I get my back up a little bit when I hear things like privilege and that sort of thing, because there's a certain amount of resentment that goes towards that. And being that there's such a cultural within the Jewish community, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but it seems like there's such a cultural push towards succeeding in terms of, like you said, education and that sort of thing, that it only seems natural that if you live within a culture like that, that you would be driven towards certain things, like succeeding financially or whatever it is. So yeah, I just that's why I always get a little weirded out by people who are resentful towards somebody else's success.
But it's understandable that they resent people that are more successful, especially if they feel they're being taken advantage of by them. So it's understandable. It doesn't mean that it's right, but at least I understand why they feel that way. It doesn't surprise me that people hate Jews.
Right. Yeah, and I like the way you're thinking about this. Obviously, you would be thinking about it I mean, a lot over your life. But understanding the problem and finding solutions seems to be, well, at least, sorry, to find a solution, understanding it first. There seems to be a lot of people who would just say, no, it's wrong. It's the same thing we were talking about bullying. It's like, no, well, that's wrong and we need to condemn it and then it'll go away. Whereas if you understand the way somebody thinks and why they think the way they do, I think you're more capable of having maybe even a dialogue where you're more likely to solve an issue. Have you ever heard of is it Burnt Davis? Daryl? Is it Daryl Davis?
Yes, in fact, I wrote about him.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's this black man who befriended KKK people,
Right,
and turned them around. Yes, I wrote about him, and I agree with the approach very much.
yeah. Yeah, he's fascinating. I have to believe that he has done more for turning around people's racism and anti-Semitism than
Many other people. Yes,
Yeah.
You're right.
Now we can quantify it, and I think that's the problem. He can literally say, "I've turned around 220 people," and you know, and I have the robes, and I think a lot of people say, "Well, that doesn't seem like too many," but I don't know. I find him fascinating, and I do think he's doing some incredible things.
But I criticize my own people's defense organizations for taking the wrong approach.
Okay.
Now, Jews have created Jewish defense organizations. You know, the ADL, the American Defamation League, was originally a strictly Jewish organization, but it became diverse to include everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been so many organizations to defend Jews, and I won't say they haven't done any good, but I think there is a point where you start doing more harm than good. The Jewish organizations do not take the approach that Daryl Davis took.
No.
I have a very different approach. You know, what the defense organizations are trying to do is to stop everybody from being prejudiced. So if people hate Jews, the solution to my problem is for society to stop people from hating Jews. It hasn't worked all that well.
Mm-hmm.
Another approach is to teach for us ourselves to learn how to stop thinking like victims. You know, because we're victimized, and that's why we want defense. Now, it's one thing to be defended from things like murder and arson and stuff like that, but from people disliking us or disrespecting us or hating us, you can't force people to stop doing that. My point is,
yeah,
if I'm a Jew, I know that a lot of people hate us and they have reasons that may seem justifiable in their minds for hating us. I can't expect society to make them stop hating me. Mm-hmm. But if I deal with them, I need to know how to deal with them so that they'll hate me less, or maybe even like me instead of hating me. So mm-hmm. I need to take responsibility for for dealing with the anti-Semitism that I'm facing. I can't expect society to make it go away.
Right, and I mean that's kind of across the board approach. We're speaking specifically now about anti-Semitism, but I mean, with regard to, you know, with the last time we talked about bullying, and it's sort of a similar thing where your approach is to not get angry, and sort of, that's why I brought up Daryl Davis, actually, is because he's very good at that, is that he can sit down and not take it to heart, it seems, what is being said to him by a complete, the most racist person in America. He can sit down with, like, the grand dragon of the KKK, and that's why I sort of put you guys together, and because it seems like a very similar approach to what you would advocate.
Yeah, it's extremely similar. There was a documentary about him. Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
The greatest pushback that he got was not from white racists. It was from his people from the black community.
Yeah,
Because,
the younger activists.
yeah, because they felt that he wasn't really understanding them and what they're going through. Because
Yeah.
what Daryl Davis is doing is he's going to white racists at their meetings. They're not killing anybody. They just get together and they talk anti-black stuff, and he's going to talk to them. But in the inner city neighborhoods, they have to deal with policemen with guns.
Mm-hmm.
And these policemen often use the guns if they feel endangered by them. So they're dealing with shootings. They're not dealing with middle-class, comfortable white people getting together to express hatred. And then this black guy comes along and treats them nicely. And they think, oh, maybe blacks aren't all that bad. This is like nothing to the kind of racism that the blacks, especially in the inner cities, are experiencing.
Yeah. So what did you think about that interaction? I thought it was,
I think he didn't deal with them correctly. I don't remember all that clearly because I saw it a couple of years ago.
Right.
But I don't think he dealt with them properly. He got annoyed or angry with them.
He did. Yeah, he called them ignorant.
Yeah, which is the wrong thing to do. You're not going to get people to listen to you and to respect you if you call them ignorant.
Yeah, and it kind of shocked me, actually, because it was the first time I've ever seen him be sort of indignant and sort of just, a little bit less than kind.
Because people don't like being criticized, especially by people of your own group who are claiming you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's hard for him to deal with it. I would have welcomed him to consult with me. I might have been able to show him a better way to deal with members of his own community who are criticizing him. Because it can be. But listen, he didn't study psychology. He probably hasn't thought all of this through as deeply as I have. So I can't expect him to know how to handle every kind of situation. But I'd be happy to talk to him about how to deal with resistance from within the black community.
Right. Yeah, because I imagine that to some extent, and I don't think it should be this way, but to some extent that must be a little more difficult to, you sharing such a similar goal with people. If say it was two people from the Jewish community who they have the same goal of trying to, change people's minds with regard to anti-Semitism. It must be almost even more difficult to disagree within the group. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's tougher when the criticism comes from within your own group, and your group disagrees or doesn't accept what you're doing, or thinks what you're doing is naive. It's tough. You would like support from within your own group, especially when you see yourself as defending and promoting your own group
right
to the eyes of the world.
Yeah,
you're
hoping
doing
to help.
a good thing, and you're trying to help your own group, and your group members are saying you don't know what you're talking about.